What is up, ladies and gentlemen? Thanks for checking out Shinsen88 Gaming. Today, we're going to be taking a look at one of my favorite games from the past couple of years, that game being Postvoid. This came out in 2020, developed and published by YCJY Games, who we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. And at its core, Postvoid is essentially a first-person action roguelike, or roguelite. The Steam page calls it a challenging arcade-style first-person shooter with one objective: be fast. And I would say that's pretty accurate. Now, I know if you're like me, many of you probably just went, "Oh, great, an action roguelike, skip." However, this one does enough different and enough unique that I think it is worth your time. And we'll take a look at why. Now, undoubtedly, the first thing that you noticed about Postvoid, whether you were watching this sort of trippy psychedelic intro or looking at the Steam page, was probably the art style and just the general presentation. It's very unique, it's very trippy, pretty psychedelic, kind of reminds me of Hotline Miami in a way, but has its own sort of identity. The enemy designs are all super weird, like, yep, there you go. The presentation generally is just very psychedelic, and the epilepsy warning on the beginning of this video was no joke. There are bright flashing lights and colors everywhere. But it's a good time. So, Postvoid. Let's go ahead and hop in. I'll talk about sort of how the gameplay works. We'll get into some more details about it as we go. Click. I faked you out there, didn't I? Alright, welcome to Postvoid. So the first thing you notice is that I was not lying about the speed, nor was the Steam page. Essentially what you're trying to do in this game is make your way from point A to point B, which sounds fairly simple. However, one of the things that makes that a little bit more difficult for you is the fact that you have this idol in your left hand that is constantly draining liquid, and if the liquid runs out, that's it. You are dead. Game over. In addition to that, taking damage also drains the liquid, but killing enemies will replenish the liquid, so you got to kind of find a balance between killing every enemy and running through to the end as quickly as possible. If you get in a good rhythm, you'll find that you can sort of kill enemies as you go and still run forward. And that's where you're going to hit sort of a sweet spot. You'll hit your post-void zen, I guess, and make it through quickly. So there are several different weapons. All of these, except for the default pistol, are acquired through a random upgrade that you can pick at the end of each level. Upgrades that are not specific weapons can actually stack with each other, so we'll see a few of them. There's stuff like, you know, extra ammo, faster reload speed, or enemies explode upon death. Always pick that one. It's great. A typical playthrough of this game takes anywhere from like 5 to 10 minutes. You'll notice that I'm on the longer end of that for this playthrough, the reason being that I wanted to try and show off every single weapon in a single playthrough, which I did manage to do. Although typically if you were going for speed, you would find the weapon that you like and then stick with that one the entire time. You'll notice that the game does a very good job of giving you feedback in terms of explosions, screen shake, blood on the screen, like motion lines. It just gets very, very frantic. And although the levels, which are randomly generated, are quite maze-like, the sort of frantic pace pretty much never gets you lost. If you do happen to turn a corner that's a dead end, you are never more than like a couple feet away from the correct way. So that's actually one of the more impressive things about the way that the game was designed, is that it definitely feels frantic and feels like you're trying to find your way through this maze, but you can generally do that pretty easily, while of course trying to dodge bullets and whatnot. You know we're going shotgun. So one of the cool things about the shotgun is that it is a double barrel, of course, but if we start stacking on some extra ammo power-ups, we can actually go ahead and fire more than 2 shots, which is quite useful, as you might imagine. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But generally, what you're seeing here is the gameplay of Postvoid. There are not a huge number of different enemies that you'll encounter. There's not a huge variety in the level design, but I think it's just enough. And although you will probably look at this and go, I mean, that doesn't seem like there'd be that much replay value. Somehow there is. And I think it's the speedrunning aspect. You just constantly want to get faster and be able to play better. Let's go more shooting, less reloading. That sounds good. You will most likely not be able to clear the game on your first couple runs, but once you get in a rhythm, you can start lining up stuff like headshots more easily, which, yes, there are headshots, and they are important. And once you get that down, you'll be sort of finding the perfect balance between killing the enemies and not going so fast that you just get shredded by their gunfire. But it's very, very trippy, and that's really the simplest way to describe it. So what about the studio that made this game, YCJY Games? I actually know almost nothing about them, or knew nothing, prior to doing a little bit of research for this video. I'd never heard of them before, I'd never played one of their games, and at this point I definitely want to play more of their games. So these guys have been around since about 2016, I guess. It's two dudes from Sweden, and again, having not played any of their other games, The Aquatic Adventures of the Lost Human, and they have a game that they're working on now called Keep Driving, so definitely going to be checking some of those out. But there's not really too much info on them. If you go on their Steam store, they also have another game called Sea Salt, which might be worth checking out. By the way, there was one thing that I didn't mention about Postvoid. Shame on me. This game on Steam actually goes for $3 American, which is a heck of a value for something this good. That probably is something that most people would look at and go, all right, I can probably take a chance on that. And it is oh so worth it. Uh-oh, uh-oh. Things got a little bit dangerous there. You see what I mean about if you take your time a little bit, generally you will have enough time to line up a kill on the enemies to get your liquid back. Generally. What you really don't want is to get into a hallway with no enemies and your liquid rapidly draining. You'll also see how the enemies explode upon death becomes very, very useful. And I think we're ready for the Uzi. Although it honestly looks more like a Tech 9 than an Uzi, but I won't fault them for that. It's okay. The recoil on this gun is pretty intense, which actually makes it way more satisfying to use. Certainly not in this game. You definitely don't just pull the trigger and have your bullets fly straight ahead with no recoil. You gotta definitely manage your recoil. Which I think, again, just adds to the satisfaction of playing when it's a little bit more of a skill ceiling. Gotcha. And honestly, that's about it for Postvoid. You're just going to have to take my word for it that it is immensely satisfying to play. And there is a surprising amount of replay value if you're into the speed and into the gameplay. Like I mentioned, you will likely not complete your first few playthroughs, so even just getting to the end can be a little bit of a challenge, but even afterwards when you've sort of dialed it in a little bit more... Oh, we're almost dead here. Alright. Even after you've dialed it in a little bit more, for me, it's still fun, and even after having 100%ed it, I still keep it installed and play it from time to time. But for $2.99, like, come on, that's an amazing deal. It's like a coffee. Although, to be fair, on some days a coffee might be a better investment, but still. Now, although there is not too much variety in the level design, it is effective, and you do get those sort of palette swaps that are very typical of old-school games. Until we start getting towards the very end, yeah, let's go back to the shotgun. And look at that, we're back at the intro stage. Interesting. Incidentally, there's only one song in the soundtrack, which is that one that's been looping in the background. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Okay. That was close. By the way, don't ask me what the story is. I honestly have no idea. What I do know, however, is that we just completed Postvoid. Anyways, I hope that, yeah, that makes sense. Anyways, everybody, I hope you've enjoyed this little look at Postvoid. Well worth your time, in my opinion, and I look forward to whatever this developer comes up with next. And in fact, also things that they came up with before that I haven't looked at yet. Thanks very much for watching. See you on the next video, and till then, God bless.